time once again for Game Points to bring in the expert. RotoWire.com senior editor Jeff Erickson here to teach you more than what you learn at that fancy school of yours. So take the crayons out of your ears, shut up, and listen good. Here is Jeff Erickson.
Good evening, Jeff. Matt Ross is actually on the IR, so I've pegged him down my draft board in my fantasy football keeper league.
Hey, it was good to hear his voice in the intro, though. That was still good.
As always. How you been, Jeff?
I'm good. Good to talk to you, Mo.
It's been a long time, my friend. With fantasy football now here, people doing the draft boards and whatnot, I'll dive right in right now. For PPR, who is the first choice that'll go off the board in your mind?
Still LaShawn McCoy. Almost regardless of format. The only time you might say that otherwise, if you're playing in a 2 QB league, then you might go with one of the quarterbacks. But I think in almost every single other format there, McCoy's going to be the guy because he just gets accumulated yards. Maybe in a touchdown-only league, you downgrade him just a smidge, but even then, probably not. After that, it's either Charles or Megatron. I actually sometimes like to go Megatron there at number 2. But then again, I'm becoming increasingly running back wary, so I don't mind taking an elite wide receiver in the top 5 right now.
Adrian Peterson was the go-to guy the last couple of years as the number 1 pick in PPR and, of course, touchdown heavy. Do you think he falls out of the top 5, or will he still be a top 5 pick?
I have seen him go as low as 6. I've also seen him go as high as 1. So, I mean, it's hard to bet against Adrian Peterson. People usually lose when they bet against him. You know, he came back so much quicker than people expected 2 years ago. Last year, a little bit of a disappointment. I mean, the team brought him down a little bit. His groin injury late in the season really hurt him, too. And that's the thing. He's at the age where running backs tend to taper off a little bit. Now, I'm not saying he's going to do that. In fact, I still think he's a top 5 player overall. But let's remember the careers of Sean Alexander. Even LaDainian Tomlinson actually kind of dropped off a little bit closer to this age and accumulated workload. You always want to worry about that sometimes.
We're in conversation with Jeff Erickson of RotoWire.com on Game OT here on TSN Radio 690. Matt Forte, a guy that finished number 2 in rushing last year, does he still go in the top 3, or is he a top 5 pick, generally speaking?
Typically he is. He's one I'm kind of staying away from unless it's a PPR format, just because I'm worried about what happens at the goal line. I know Michael Bush is gone, but they drafted Kadeem Carey from Arizona. He's going to get a lot of those goal line carries, I think. It's year 2 of that Bears offense. I'm a believer in the Trestman offense, and I think they're going to put up a lot of numbers. I wonder how many of them go to Forte. He stayed unnaturally healthy for him last year, so I think that maybe he gets a little bit more dinged up. He had such a workload last year. At least, from our fantasy purposes, he didn't make their team didn't make the playoffs, so that's a little bit less of an accumulated workload.
The first quarterback to go off the board last year, we saw 2 5,000-yard passers in Peyton Manning and Drew Brees. Who's the first one to go off this year in your mind?
Manning's going off because of the ridiculous touchdown count last year. And he'll probably get in the 40s again this year. If he gets 45 instead of 52 touchdowns, it's not a bad year. It's still an amazing year. I think we have to condition ourselves on expectations. But, I am also seeing him go in the first round a lot in leagues where you're only using one quarterback. And I think that's kind of a mistake, especially the smaller league you're in. If you're in a 14-team league, a 16-team league, well, yeah, then it still makes sense because you're using so many more quarterbacks. But in a 10 or 12-team league, I think it's a mistake to draft a quarterback in the first round.
Jeff, how concerned are you over the fact that Marshawn Lynch held out with Seattle and just recently did come back, but still, of course, behind the rest of his teammates?
That doesn't bother me. It was such a short holdout; it really doesn't affect me too much. However, I'm a little worried about him regardless because, again, we kind of beat this theme home, but the workload was so high. He was in beast mode. He was in beast mode in the playoffs 2 years in a row, 3 playoff games. Well, it takes that accumulated pounding takes its toll typically. And, yeah, if you bet it against him last year, you lost. But if you bet against him this year, it might be a percentage play not to get him. I've seen him go as late as like the bottom of the second round because of that concern. I think a lot of people, and this is in a PPR league, in the standard scoring league where it's touchdown heavy, or in a touchdown only league, then you got to bump them up pretty much.
We're in conversation with Jeff Erickson of RotoWire.com on Game OT here on TSN Radio 690. The first receiver to go off the board, given that Josh Gordon is still in limbo, is who?
First receiver to go off the board is still Calvin Johnson, even if Josh Gordon came back tomorrow and had 0 games suspended. I know Gordon had more yards last year, but Megatron is the reliable bet. a safer quarterback situation, better offense all around. Second wide receiver, and it's pretty close actually, is Demaryius Thomas. The Broncos dealing with Peyton factor there. No Eric Decker this year. Maybe Thomas gets more red zone looks. Those two guys are gold stock. I think they're head and shoulders above the rest of the wide receiver pool.
Jeff, what do we expect from Julio Jones early on in the season, obviously recovering from that broken foot last year?
Right, and an unusual procedure to fix that, too. It's, not the most common injury. He's still falling in the bottom of the first-tier wide receivers, 6 or 7 deep. I think he and Jordy Nelson finish off that first-tier receivers. Des Bryant's in that. A.J. Green's obviously in that, too. Brandon Marshall also goes there. And I think Jones and Jordy Nelson are the next two after that.
Jeff, just to further elaborate on the receiver position, of course, you mentioned Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey. If you had to pick one of the two right now, who would you take? Would it be Brandon Marshall because of his PPR potential?
Brandon Marshall, yeah, that, and because of his connection with Cutler in the past. Cutler looks to him first, second, and sometimes third. I know when he came back, he was going to Jeffrey more. Jeffrey did break out last year. I think Marshall's still the percentage play.
We're in conversation with Jeff Erickson of RotoWire.com here on TSN Radio 690. Any sleepers in your mind that you want to mention to us on air?
Well, yeah, sure. Sleepers, first of all, are on the eye of the beholder. One of the things we're always looking at there is what format you're in, how deep are you going, and so whether it's PPR, whether it's 2 QBs, whether it's 3 receiver slots. Brandon Cooks, rookie out of from the New Orleans Saints out of Oregon State, he kind of steps right in and takes over, from the spot vacated there. So I think that he's going to maybe even start week 1. They usually start 3 receivers. Saints spread around. He's making waves in training camp. The only thing I don't think I like about him, though, is his size. So that means in the red zone he may not get that many targets. But between the 20s, some deep balls, he's going to get a lot of looks. And I think he's a dynamic player, so I like him. If you want to go even deeper at wide receiver, Martavis Bryant for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They don't have any other tall receivers, so I think you get a lot of red zone looks. Yeah, again, we don't want to gush over training camp results, and that's the thing. It's so tough to kind of just dial it back right now. But he is catching everything thrown his way, and I do like him quite a bit.
Rookies in particular here, I know we talk about Johnny Manziel all the time here, but is he a worthwhile pick if you have one last pick in your draft board to say, let's stash him on our team and see what happens if he does end up being a starter down the road?
Absolutely, yes. And you'll notice the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of successful teams have an elite quarterback, and they pair him with that upsale rookie. Cam Newton was paired with Drew Brees a couple of years ago. That seemed to be a popular pairing. RG3 with an elite quarterback. You hold on to those guys for the 5 weeks and the upside potential. Now, here's the thing. If you only use one quarterback, you're in a 10 or 12-team league, it's going to be hard to trade that breakout rookie. What you're going to have to do is trade the established brand to get help at other positions. But don't be afraid to do that. If you're buying into the skills on draft day, buy into them during the regular season. Yeah, I take a wild card pick on that. I mean, it's a lot. You're going for high upside. You're not really. I think, drafters sometimes make a mistake of going for balance, or they don't want to take another quarterback just because they have an elite guy. Go for the best talent available. You can always trade, you can always maneuver to make the balance fit later on. Go for that guy that can go big, can bust out. I think it's a great plan to go with Manziel late.
Finally, Jeff, you mentioned about being cautious with the running back position here. What about the quarterback position? Is there any quarterbacks out there that you should stay away from in your fantasy football draft?
Stay away from is tough to say because, there's a price on everyone. I'm usually not going to pay the price it takes to get Matthew Stafford. I'm not buying into the hype that the Lions offense is going to be better than it's been the last couple of years. Just look at the raw attempt numbers he's had the last couple of years. He's not going to throw more than he did just because they brought in the Saints coordinator. It's not going to make him any better. He gets by on volume, and I think he's going to be a good, viable fantasy quarterback. But I'm seeing people reach up and take him as the number 4 fantasy quarterback, and I think that's a big mistake.
Jeff, what do you have lined up for RotoWire.com? Of course, fantasy football officially underway, draft boards galore. How many drafts are you in this year, my friend?
Probably 12 to 15, finalizing that. I just got an invite to one with a bunch of baseball scouts, and it's going to be hard to turn that down. Those are people I want to get to know, so I'll probably do that league. I picked one up with my daughter's parents, my daughter's friends' parents, people I'm going to be seeing for the next 8 years through their school, so I'm doing that one, and it's a live draft. So, every year I say I'm going to scale back, and then every year I add one, so go figure. So I'll probably do 12 to 15.
Well, Jeff, I can tell you one thing. Stefano Michello, Jimmy G, our producer, Matt Ross, and I are all in one fantasy football draft, so we'll keep you apprised on how well we do this season, my friend.
Absolutely, and I do consulting, so if you've had problems in the past, give me a buzz.
Absolutely. Jeff, thanks very much for coming on. Look forward to conversing with you down the road, my friend.
Thanks.